Hey everyone, my name's Tyler, and I'm a computer science major and secretary for the CSE Club. I'm here to provide a tutorial for beginner web page design, or web page programming, whatever you prefer to call it. Before we get started, some of you might be thinking, why build my own website when I can just use something like Squarespace? And this isn't a jab at Squarespace. It's a perfectly fine tool to use, especially if you're a little wary of how to start, or you just want to get something out there. If you're a computer science student, you probably have an interest in this and have already made your own reasons as to why you're here. But for those new to this or skeptical or whatever, let me tell you some benefits about learning this trade. So benefit number one is it's the perfect time to learn. For one, it's not that hard of a subject, and there's plenty of resources on this topic. If my tutorial is not working for you after watching it, you can find 1,000+ tutorials online for free. So probably more relevant in recent times, but benefit number two is you can work from home. All you need is a decent enough computer and an IDE. So something more in line with today's tutorial is in the name in and of itself, website design. You'll have full artistic expression on your website. You can create it however you want, or however your client wants. Which leads me to my last benefit that I'm going to share with you is, yes, you have the potential to make money. Nailing down an exact pay scale varies from place to place, but I've seen a range anywhere from $40,000 to $75,000. And considering you can work from home, that's not bad, especially if it's just a side job. So without dwelling on the why for too much longer, let's get started. So for this tutorial, you're going to need an IDE, which stands for an Integrated Developer or Development Environment. The one I like to use personally is Visual Studio Code. It's a streamlined version of Visual Studio, and it's perfect for just opening up and getting right to work. I've put a link for the download in the description of the video. Go ahead and download it for your operating system. I'm using Windows. Once the setup is installed, go ahead and click on all the confirmation buttons. And now it should be installed. Alright, you can go ahead and open it up, and you'll see a page that shows release notes and a Windows welcome tab or something like that. You can exit out of those, they're useless. Now go ahead and open a new file by clicking on the tab in the top left corner called File, and then New File. And we'll jump right into HTML. So you'll probably have noticed that the file is called Untitled. Now we're going to go ahead and change that. We're going to rename and save it. So to do so, you can go back to the File tab, and there's an option called Save As. Go ahead and click it and rename the file to index.html. Why? Because Google said so. But really it has something to do with client-side searching for a file called index or something like that. It has to default. I don't know, you can find a much better explanation by Googling it. In the HTML file, we have to declare a few important lines called meta tags before we actually get to work. If you program in C++, this is similar to referencing a C library, such as IOStream or CTime. If you're completely new, think of wanting to watch a movie or play a game you haven't downloaded. So you put the disc in the DVD or the console, and you start playing it. Obviously there's more nuances to it, but that's the basic idea. Now here's the benefit of using Visual Studio Code. The beauty of IDEs is they realize it's kind of annoying to type all that crap. So if you'd follow along, I want you to, in your HTML file, press one key, the exclamation point, and a drop-down window should appear with 1 exclamation point and 3 exclamation points. Press the first one, and alright, cool. Now we don't have to type all of those meta tags. Isn't that easy? So now we can officially get started. If you'd please direct your attention to where it says body, this is where our main focus for the webpage will be. This is where we'll put all of our syntax, more commonly known as tags. Now according to my script right here, I'm supposed to make a tone-deaf joke about memorizing HTML's syntax, then quickly retract for comedic effect. No. In case it isn't painfully obvious, you don't have to memorize all of this. Why would you? It's not optimal. HTML has like 1,000 tags. So instead, I want you to go online and Google w3schools.com. This is such a great resource and generally a good way to learn. They have a few exercises and all the tags listed. You'd be foolish not to use this. If it wasn't obvious by now, you should click the HTML tag when you get to the website and look at the syntax. So go ahead, pause this video and try a few tags on your own. Then I'll show you some examples and you can follow along with me. Okay, hopefully you've tried a few. Now go ahead and follow on screen. I want you to type less than H1, then close it with the greater than. This should be right next to your question mark on your keyboard. On Visual Studio Code, it will autocomplete the closing tag, which is a / in the same tag that you just typed. The tag we just typed is called a heading tag, or header. Now move the cursor over into the middle and type something in the middle. I'm going to type my name and save it. I press Ctrl S to save. If you're on Mac, you can save it by pressing Command S. So now we're going to open this file in our browser so we can actually view the web page. I'm using Chrome, but your browser of choice shouldn't make a difference. So go to where you saved the file and grab that file by clicking and dragging into your browser. And would you look at that, we're web page programmers now. I'm just joking, don't be fooled, it's not that easy. There's obviously more to it, but this is our first step and you should be proud of yourself. Now I'm going to show you a few more tags and then move on to CSS. So this next bit isn't necessarily a tag, but it is a good idea to learn. I'm going to teach you how to document and comment. This is a great habit to learn early on as to avoid future headaches. So go ahead and type the greater than sign and the exclamation point and the subtraction sign twice. Now you can type whatever you want in this boundary that you've created, and it'll only show up inside your IDE. For people new to this is a great idea to do often. Making quick notes on your project isn't a bad idea, especially when we link it to CSS and JavaScript and have to debug it later on, or figure out errors. So the last thing I'll teach on HTML is the button. It's a very simple tag and can be applied with JavaScript later as well as CSS. Now the same way you've done all the tags, but instead of putting a H1 or an exclamation point, you just type button. So now we save and we go to our file in the browser, we reload the page, and now we have a, you guessed it, button. A button that doesn't do anything. I feel very accomplished. If you followed W3 School's tutorials like I said at the beginning of this video, you'd likely see something called the style tag. I personally advise against using it. There are some cases where it could come in handy to write a nice little CSS style in your HTML file just to test it, or maybe you can't be bothered to make a CSS page. I'm telling you though, it's not in your benefit to do it this way. You may have noticed you can write just about anything in HTML, and that's a blessing as well as a curse. Because HTML isn't a programming language, it doesn't need to compile. Whatever you write will show up. HTML does not care. It won't tell you any errors that you may or may not have. Neither will CSS, because half of the time the errors aren't really errors, they're just you didn't link it up right. So splitting them up this way makes it easier to find those type of errors. So what is CSS exactly? And HTML for that matter? A nice way to think of it is HTML is the bones and flesh of your website, and CSS is the thing that makes it not gross to look at. So I'm going to kindly ask you to make a new file and title it index_.css. Of course you can name it whatever you like, but it should at least try to follow this convention, so it's easier to locate. Alright, cool. Now we have the style sheet, but that doesn't mean our HTML will recognize it right away. We have to link them together. So go to your HTML, and in the header, type exactly what I have right here. If you prefer a link, you can just Google HTML CSS linking and copy that link, or I might be generous enough to put it in the description. Now let's quickly test this out and see if it works. Over in your CSS page, type H1 with a curly brace. If you don't know where that is, it's right next to the big P key. Don't you dare giggle at that. And now it should automatically make a closing curly brace. Now, looking at the many references from W3 Schools, I'm just going to use the easiest one, the change color. So I'm going to type color and colon, and then I'm going to pick a color. And look at that. I can change the color of this text as I please. As to not be redundant, as this should be a pretty straightforward system, and similar to HTML, I'm just going to go ahead and leave it up to you to discover how you can change the properties of your web page. There's more things than color that you can change. You can change sizes and stuff, you can change blurriness of background images. Really, the sky's the limit. Now I'm going to quickly move on to JavaScript. You're probably asking if HTML and CSS are essentially the whole body of our web page, then what's JavaScript? JavaScript is the brain. I don't know. Analogies are hard to write when there isn't anything left to go on. In other words, JavaScript is functionally the functionality of your website. So if you remember, I put a button on my little web page at the beginning of this, and it does absolutely nothing. Not until we program it to do something with JavaScript. So let's give that button some functionality. There are many functions you can create and various examples online. If you may have noticed, this is more of a hands-off tutorial. My goal is to not necessarily teach you everything under the sun, but to get you in the mindset of wanting to build something, test it, and see if someone's already done it online and change it. So when you create this function, I urge you to change it in some way when we're done with this tutorial and see what you can do with it. This is how most people learn programming. They're taught a few algorithms and they're taught to break it, deconstruct it, and build something new on top of it or build it in a new way. Okay, first things first. Let's create a new file, same as before, and save it where you've saved everything else. We'll title this file indexscripts.js, and now we'll link them together, HTML and JavaScript. So right below the CSS link, type script and give it a source by typing src and set that equal to, in quotations, indexstyle.js, or whatever you named your file. And remember, put it in quotations. Moving on into the JavaScript file, we're going to create a function named myFunction, and we're going to open it and close it with our curly braces respectively. Now we're going to create a variable called x and set that equal to document.createElement, and in the parentheses, and you're going to put quotes inside the parentheses, and in between the quotes you're going to put button. It can be anything, but I highly recommend button since that's what we're manipulating. And outside of the parentheses we're going to put a semicolon. So what we did, for those who are new, we created a function that makes a variable to be manipulated, and now we'll do the same exact thing except for create element. We're going to say create text node, and we're going to name its variable t. And I guess let's put don't press. What these statements do is they will create a new button when I've pressed my button that says don't press this button. You'll see what I mean when I actually show it off. So now I want the button to create other buttons that say don't press. For those who program, I think it could possibly be done in a for loop and have it create several buttons until it reaches 100 buttons. But since I don't want to and I have W3 Schools open, I'll just do it their way, which allows me to create a button upon clicking the press button. Okay, let's finish this off. Go ahead and type x.appendChild in parentheses, put t, and right below that, document.body.appendChild in parentheses x. And go ahead and close those out with semicolons. So what this is going to officially do is add the button element to our web page, and we can recall it as many times as we'd like. But now we have to link this actual function in the HTML. So in the button tag, right before the less than, type onClick equal to myFunction. Be careful, as you could probably see, I make an error and I don't do that. Luckily I catch myself later on. There it is. You now have basic knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But please understand, you're barely getting your feet wet. We just discussed design. I could easily make another tutorial delving deeper and adding more topics on how to actually get your website up and running, just as easily as you could search up a billion other tutorials that are on this subject. That isn't the point. This was designed to explain an interesting skill and get your feet wet. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching and have a good evening.